morning, everybody, and welcome to the July meeting of the Western Planning Committee of BCP Council. Before we go any further, I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer, Jill Holyoke, to keep us up to date with any housekeeping arrangements.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got any apologies for absence today?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors John Challoner, Simon McCormack and Peter Sidaway, and substitute members, Councillor Tony Trent is here for Councillor Sidaway.
Thank you. So for those, well, for the benefit of everybody, we'll just go around and introduce ourselves, members of the committee and others who are here with us. My name is Marion Lepedvin. I'm Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward, and I'm Chair of this meeting and this committee.
Jo Clements, Vice Chairman of the committee, Councillor for Penhill Ward.
Cameron Adams, Councillor for Kinston.
Councillor Chapman Law for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Dower for Kinston.
Councillor Cooper from Hamworthy.
Councillor Brian Hitchcock from Hamworthy.
Kate Salmon, Councillor for Moordown.
Tony Trent, Councillor for Alderney and Bourne Valley, here as a substitute.
We also have various council officers with us. You've already heard from our Democratic Services Officer, who will be taking the minutes and generally keeping us in order, timing the speakers and that sort of thing. And we've got planning officers. So if we start from...
Good morning, it's Monika Kwiatkowska, I'm team leader for the West team.
From third senior solicitor.
David Hodges, Development Management Manager.
Thank you. And we also have various officers joining us online, case officers to present the various applications, and also other officers available to answer queries as they come up on other issues to do with law or give us guidance on various issues. So before we go any further, are there any declarations of interest from anyone? Councillor Dower.
Yes, Councillor Dower, I've got a declaration of interest because I'll be speaking as the Ward Councillor for Kinston Ward on 11 Ashridge Avenue.
So you will be removing yourself from the committee at that stage. You will become a member of the public for that item.
I will.
And return.
Yes.
Afterwards. Thank you. Just to make it clear for everybody. And one thing I've always managed to miss is agreeing the minutes of the last meeting, which we have before us.
Apologies, Chair, that's my fault for missing it off.
Oh, is it not there? I usually manage to miss it when I'm reading through the running order. So, members of the committee who were here last time, are you all happy to accept the minutes as an accurate record of our deliberations and decisions? Getting lots of nods, so I think we can say that's agreed. Thank you very much. So after the officer presentations for each application, we'll hear any public speakers, followed by any ward councillors and any other councillors who wish to speak, and then we'll turn to members of the committee. So could we start with item 6A, which is 39 Brudenell Avenue in Poole?
Yes, hi.
Thank you.
Chair. Hello, everyone. Morning. Just showing my screen. Are you able to see the presentation up there?
That's fine. Thank you very much. And we can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay. Great. So the application in front of you today is at 39 Brudenell Avenue in Poole, and it seeks full planning permission to demolish the existing two-storey dwelling and replace it with 7 apartments with associated parking, landscaping and access. So I'm recommending that the application is granted with conditions in accordance with the details as set out in the report. So this is just a map showing the broad location of the site with Shaw Road down here to the southwest, not too far from Evening Hill. And the site lies just off of Haven Road, which is a main through route from Canford Cliffs High Street down to Shaw Road, which leads onto Sandbanks. So the site lies at the end of the through road of Brudenell Avenue, just off of Brudenell Road. The site consists of a large detached dwelling set in a single plot. And the area is characterised by a range of large single dwellings and apartment blocks set within verdant surrounds. This is just to show the site as it stands in a bit more detail. So you can see the large existing dwelling set in highly landscaped grounds with a swimming pool to the south of the main dwelling. So some site photos. This is the front of the application site, the two-storey dwelling that was built in the 1950s and is slightly set up from the street scene. And here's the view to the front of the curtilage. And this shows the southern side of the site, so showing significant landscaping to the south of the site along this side wall here. And the picture on the left is the front of the dwelling facing towards the rear of the site, and the right hand image shows what's left of the swimming pool facing towards the front of the site, which is down here with the hedge along this part. This shows the rear of the site, showing the large landscape grounds and how the site is slightly set up, like sloping up to the rear or the east. And the northern side of the site showing the dwellings to the north at number 37 and 37A, which are 2 contemporary recently built dwellings of 3 stories next door. Just to show these in more context in the street scene, so these are the dwellings at number 35, 37 and 37A, with the site just over here off the screen to the right hand side. And this is the dwelling opposite the site of the street at number 12 Brudenell Avenue, set a significant distance away and screened with TPO protected trees. And finally, just to show the site to the south, this is 7 Brudenell Road, which is a corner plot with the dwelling currently boarded up, ready to be demolished. The site has permission for flats and a new dwelling, which I'll go into later in more detail. So here is the proposed site plan, and the scheme seeks to demolish the existing dwelling and erect a 3-storey block of 7 apartments, with 3 apartments to the ground and the first floors, and then a single apartment to the second floor, all with private terraces or balcony areas. The front building line would be mostly in line with the existing, just set at a slightly different angle, and development will be kept to the central part of the plot, fairly in line with the existing dwelling. So to the front or west of the site, which is just to highlight this area as the plan is sort of in reverse. So this is the front of the site. So imagine it's flipped. So this is the western part of the site. The existing access will be slightly widened, and 4 parking spaces to the outside of the building will be set in grasscrete pavers alongside cycle parking provision for visitors here. The landscaping to the front of the site will be fairly in line with the existing level of hard standing, though it would be more visible through removal of parts of the hedge to the frontage. And a landscaping plan will be conditioned as part of any approval to ensure that the building is set into verdant surrounds, and I'll go more into detail on that in a bit. This is just the site plan, so the same site plan layout showing the second floor instead, just showing it to be set in from all sides to reduce the impact on the surroundings. To go on to the proposed floor plans, this shows the proposed basement floor plan in more detail. So we've got car parking to the scheme underground at provision of 2 spaces per unit, which also includes the 4 spaces outside as shown on the site plan. Provision of 2 disabled bays as well to provide parking in compliance with the parking standards SPD. And then we've also got sheltered secure bike storage at 1 space per bedroom. And these parking arrangements are all supported by highways. This shows the ground floor plan. So we've got 3 units, all with 2 bedrooms, each with an outlook primarily to the front and the rear of the site. so the east and west, but with 4 side windows to the ground floor, which would look out over the boundary treatment to the sides, which will be retained. So this isn't considered to cause an issue. And we have 2 of the units here, numbers 1 and 2, are shown to be adaptable to meet the requirements of M42 accessible and adaptable home standards, and that is proposed to be conditioned to secure those details. So this is the first floor. We've got a similar layout to the ground floor plan with 3 units, stacking of uses above each other. And the first floor is shown to be slightly set in from the ground floor, again with an outlook to the front and the rear of the site, so the east and the west, with side windows to either be obscure glazed or with louvres, which I'll go into in more detail, but these would obscure any views of the block to the south. So to the ground and first floors, there will be roof terraces, which will be recessed into the sides of the site with views out to the east and west, which would be the front and the rear of the site. And this is the second floor plan. So we have 1 large single 3-bedroom unit, 1 bedroom with ensuite and larger living spaces, which would create a high standard of living for future occupants. Windows would only be to the west and the east of the site, or the front and the rear, with no outlook to the north and south sides of the site. And overall, the units will all contribute towards an acceptable standard of amenity for future occupiers with regards to outlook and natural light, and the units would all far exceed the minimum space standards. Just to show the elevations, showing the contemporary design of the proposed building, the top left image showing the basement level, which would be set into the ground because, as mentioned, the site slopes up to the east and 3 stories above, with the second floor, top floor, highly set in, from all sides. Showing the materials schedule. The block will be composed of contemporary materials with a light grey render to the walls and silver birch cladding to the basement and garage doors down here, and alchemy bronze cladding and cappings on the building surrounds, so mostly to the top. This would not be considered out of keeping with the street scene. We've got similar contemporary materials used on neighbouring dwellings at number 37 and 37A, and proposed to the south in the new development at 7 Brunel Road, which I'll go into more detail, and it's not considered to be out of keeping with the locality. This is the proposed street scene plan, showing the proposed scheme in relation to development at the north of the site. So these are number 37 and 37A, which I showed earlier, and this is number 7 Brunel Road, which has just got a recent approval to the south of the site. The pink outline on the site shows a previously approved 3-storey development at the site for a prior approval for an additional storey. The scheme will be lower in height than the extant permission and just slightly higher than the existing dwelling. But still, as you can see, lower than number 7 Brunel Road and slightly higher than number 37A, but set a lot down and lots lower than number 37. So I was going to touch on the hedge to the front of the site. As mentioned within the officer report, this is in a very poor condition. These photos are taken in early July, so reflect the current state of the hedge. It's a shame to partially lose the hedge, but the tree officer noted that it's in poor condition and not worthy of retention with a very limited lifespan. As you can see, it's mostly gone black with some small patches of green left and starting to fall over. So further greenery in better condition would be reinstated as secured in a landscaping plan, which would help to improve the image of the front of the site from the street scene. The tree officer suggested that a yew hedge would be an appropriate replacement for this. It could be sort of neat in appearance and clipped and provide a smart frontage to the site. So the bin store proposed would be an outbuilding to the front of the site with its own access off the curb for collection and a green roof, and would be set within verdant hedge surroundings to enable it to assimilate into the surroundings and reduce its impact on the street scene. That was all considered acceptable by the waste officer that commented. So to move on to amenity, first of all, to touch on amenity impacts on adjacent sites. So first of all, the sites to the east and west So number 12 Brunel Avenue, as mentioned, lies opposite the site at a distance of 36 metres away. As can be seen from the image, this dwelling is highly set back from the street scene and stepped into the land behind large TPO trees that is considered provide a significant level of screening, and along with the front-to-front arrangement and the distance between the two, it's not considered that there will be any significant amenity impacts with regard to this dwelling. And when considering the buildings to the east, so the land steps up, as mentioned, to the rear of the site, and there are many further TPO trees which provide a large level of screening to this elevation, and with distances of 34 and 43 metres respectively to the uses and proposed uses to the rear of the site, there's not considered to be any concerns in relation to the amenity of either of these flat blocks and dwellings. Just to touch on the development to the south at number 7 Brunel Road and the fallback position. So the site to the south, 7 Brunel Road, currently consists of a single detached dwelling which is in a boarded up condition, but has permission for demolition of the existing dwelling and a plot split to facilitate erection of a 4-storey dwelling, which would lie here, and 4-storey block of flats on the plot. So the application for the additional floors proposed for the flats and dwelling was approved last week. So they were originally proposed to be 3 stories, similar to the proposal on our site today, but they'd now be 4-storey. The block of flats, this one here, lies far away from the proposed development, and there aren't any amenity concerns in relation to any overlooking or overbearing or overshadowing due to these distances, and also the dense green boundary treatment between the proposal and the block of flats at number 7. So the hedge and boundary treatment for number 7 is proposed to be retained where possible, and also similar to the site. So there's lots of dense boundary treatment as well between the two schemes. The proposed dwelling on site lies closer to the proposed apartment block at 39 Brunel Avenue, but has an outlook mainly to the south and to the west as well, over the majority of the site. And the schemes have been designed in accordance with each other by the same architect, so they respond to each other well. I'll go into more detail. So this is just to show the similar contemporary character proposed for the new dwelling at number 7 Brunel Road, just to the south, showing the 4 stories here. And this is the new flat block as well that's been approved with similar basement level and then 4 stories above. So just to go into a bit more detail about the amenity. So the agents provided this plan to show how the schemes respond to each other. There are a few windows proposed to the ground floor of the block at number 39, but as mentioned, these would all be set within the site and looking out over the boundary treatment set to the sides of the site, so there aren't considered to be any issues with regard to the ground floor. To the first floor, so the entrance to the block is here, and facing onto number 7 to the south, we have 1 bedroom window on the first floor. There are louvres proposed to this window, which would obscure the outlook onto number 7. So, and in number 7, the only window that would be obscure glaze is within this study. So the other windows all facing out to this elevation serve bathrooms and a laundry room, which can all be seen here. All these small windows would be obscure glaze. This would be the study, but it would be at an awkward angle that there wouldn't be any direct overlooking. And this image just shows like a cross section to show that also with proposed retention of the hedge where possible. And the awkward angles wouldn't allow any overlooking. So these louvres have been conditioned to ensure that there would be no amenity impacts with regard to number 7. And this is also looking at number 37 and 37A, to the north of the site. So the new block would lie to the side of number 37 to the front of the site and isn't considered to create any significant detrimental impacts. It will be not set significantly forward of the dwelling at number 37, set up from the street, and yeah, the impacts aren't considered to be significant. The outlook would be to the east and west of the site, with 1 obscure glazed bathroom window facing onto number 37, which isn't considered to cause any issues, and that would be from the first floor. Ground floor would face out over the fence, and there would be no side windows to the second floor. And this is just to show the arrangement. So we've got the existing dwelling at number 39, but as mentioned, the setting of the dwelling is very similar, the siting on the plot. And this is number 37A to the front with an outlook mainly to the west and this is 37 set long distance from the proposal, also looking out mainly to the front and to the rear of the site. In terms of the issue that's been raised, that there aren't any flats within Brudenell Avenue, this plan just shows the site here with all the yellow stars showing the flats in the area. It's evident there are a variety of dwelling types in the vicinity, with flatted blocks apparent at the adjacent junction with Brudenell Road, for example. So this is number 7 we were discussing here, and there's an extant permission here for a larger block of flats as well. And then we've got some opposite along Brudenell Road here, and also along Haven Road and up to the north west as well. So no part of the local plan rules out flats in principle on the site. The scheme needs to be considered on its merits in relation to the development plan as a whole, and also appears similar in design to neighbouring dwellings as well. So of a similar size to some dwellings, so it might not be immediately obvious also that it's a flat. Just to summarise, so there have been no objections for any consultees, and all the required details are being secured by conditions. So with regard to biodiversity, trees, highways, waste, urban design, drainage, renewable energy, the proposal is all considered acceptable on these grounds, subject to the suggested conditions which will be set out in the report. It should be noted that the scheme was submitted prior to implementation of the biodiversity net gain legislation, so it's not liable for the government's biodiversity net gain, but biodiversity policy PP33 does apply, where the scheme requires biodiversity enhancements to be made in accordance with this, and this is to be secured by condition. Just to note, there was a revised street scene plan received, and the scheme wasn't amended on this street scene plan, but this was just to show the updated permission at number 7 Brudenell Road with the additional story as we've discussed. And finally, just one other point to note, the landscaping condition has been updated with more specific details to ensure the 19 trees proposed to be planted are planted. So and that the hedge to the front of the site is replaced with a yew hedge of a native species. Finally, just to sum everything up, the proposal provides a net increase of 6 dwellings in a scheme which is considered to be policy compliant, and BCP Highways Authority have no objections. All representations received have been taken into account. However, recognising the collective benefits of the scheme and the tilted balance approach, it's considered the scheme would comply with policy and is recommended for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. Now we turn to speakers from members of the public. We have written statements from 2 objectors, I understand.
Thank you, Chair. The first is from Mrs. Jill Bladen. I am living in the house opposite 39 Brudenell Avenue, where the proposed site is going to be used for the construction of 7 apartments. 39 Brudenell Avenue borders 7 Brudenell Road, where 1 house and 5 apartments are to be built. At 9 Brudenell Road, there is planning for another 9 apartments too. The proposed development of 7 apartments at 39 Brudenell Avenue would make 21 apartments and 1 house in a small area. This is overdevelopment of these sites, bringing with it more traffic, noise and air pollution. The plans for all these sites are designed by Marlowe Architects. Looking at the plans for 39 Brudenell Avenue, the architects appear to be concerned that the construction of 7 apartments do not overlook the proposed house to be built by them at 7 Brudenell Road. However, they do not appear to be concerned that my privacy in house opposite will be compromised by being overlooked by 7 apartments. Furthermore, the construction of 7 apartments at 39 Brudenell Avenue will set a negative precedent, as there are currently no apartments in Brudenell Avenue. Building more apartments means it will change the character of the neighbourhood, disturbing the peace for all of us, so I object to this proposal. Second statement is from Dr. Raymond Hill. Further to my letter, it is my understanding that no apartments will be built in Brudenell Avenue. They should be built in Brudenell Road. When I was on the Council of Dorset Lake Residents Association, I attended with the officers of the Pool Planning Department various site inspections. They were clearly of the mind that no apartments should be built in Brudenell Avenue. As an instance, 9 Brudenell Avenue, the developer wished apartments, but he was told he could not have them and instead built 2 detached houses. If this application is not rejected, I can see that others will apply for apartments on other sites of Brudenell Avenue, e.g. Nairn Road. I trust for the above that this application will be rejected. Yours faithfully, Dr. R.A. Hill.
Thank you. And now to speak on behalf of the applicant, we have Matthew Holmes.
Thank you. Good morning, members. This application seeks permission for the construction of 7 homes on an accessible site within the built-up area. We have amended the plans during the course of the application in discussion with the planning officer to respond to feedback received, and we are pleased that the resultant recommendation before you is one of approval. The application site is located within the built-up area and already contains a single home. It has previously been granted prior approval for the construction of an additional floor. Additionally, the immediately adjacent site to the south has planning permission to be redeveloped with a house and block of flats. We were very careful when designing the scheme to ensure that the proposals would respond positively to the character of the area. To that end, the building has been designed in a contemporary style similar to the existing and proposed buildings on each side, as can be seen from our street scene plan. The street scene plan also shows that the proposed building is similar height to those on either side, and additionally, it will respect the building line on this side of the street. It will therefore fit comfortably within the street scene. Landscaping is provided at the front of the site and in a large rear garden. We have also designed the scheme to account for the biodiversity interests of the site. The council's relevant design criteria have been taken into account in that the homes all meet or exceed the relevant minimum space standards. The density of the development is similar to that of the approval on the adjacent sites, and also with the immediate site context of Brudenell Avenue and Brudenell Road. There are no policy objections to the principle of flats in this location. Your officer's report concludes that the proposals are appropriate to the character of the area and will provide a high-quality living environment for future residents, and we concur with that view. In terms of neighbour impact, the flats have been designed with their principal outlook to the front and rear and with balconies restricted at the sides of the building. The layout of the development appropriately accounts for the adjacent approvals and on one side and the existing house on the other and the house opposite, and as such, residential amenity will be preserved. We are pleased to note that your highways, trees, waste, environmental health, urban design and ecology officers raised no objection to the proposals. We have therefore satisfied all of the technical requirements for the application. Accordingly, the proposals will read as a well-designed housing development appropriate to the site context and deliver new homes on a site that is situated within the urban area and in an area already characterised by a mix of houses and flats. I therefore commend the proposals to you and ask that you grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. We have no ward councillors registered to speak, so now we turn to the committee. This is our chance to ask questions of the officer based on what we've heard, the presentation, things we're not clear on, not at this stage for discussion. We'll pass on to that later. So I've got a few questions, so I'm going to set the ball rolling, particularly based on the objections we've heard. Can you remind us the distance between the separation distance between the application site and the house opposite?
Yeah, of course. Let me just relocate that slide and share my screen. Should be sharing again now. I can tell you the distance is 36 metres with regard to the house opposite, and also, so I'll show you a photo. The photos here, this was taken from standing on the road, looking at the house opposite with the site set behind. Yeah, so there is a distance of 36 metres between the front building line proposed and the front of the dwelling opposite at number 12 Brudenell Avenue. It's a front-to-front arrangement with high levels of screening between, and there aren't considered to be any issues with regard to this. Let me just find, here we are. So there's a large site at number 12, which has got quite spacious grounds which are highly screened, and yeah, there aren't any concerns with regard to this relationship.
Thank you. Can you go back to the slide that you had all the yellow stars on?
Yeah, of course. Here we go.
And can you confirm whether there are any blocks of flats approved or extant in Brudenell Avenue?
There aren't any approved further up to Brudenell Avenue. I did have a look at the planning history and I couldn't find many submissions of applications for flats in Brudenell Avenue. So there weren't any refusals I could see for flats. obviously the site is next to flats, and when looking at the relevant policies, so we've got policy PP28, which is this one regarding flatted development. Essentially, if the scheme is, let me just 1 second. Essentially, if it allows for high standards of living and wouldn't prejudice neighbouring amenities, then there's no objections to flats on the site. Just get
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I've got
Just
one other
get out the
question.
local plan if you. Sorry, would you like me to read the bit about the plot severances and subdivisions from policy PP28? I was just trying to look for that one.
Why not? Let's be fully informed.
Let's go for it. So it says residential proposals involving plot severances or plot subdivisions for flatted development will be permitted where there's sufficient land to enable a type, scale and layout of development, including parking and usable amenity space, to be accommodated in a manner which will preserve or enhance the area's residential character. And this part regarding flatted development says that the scale and massing of the buildings, including width, height and roof, and spacing between buildings, is in keeping with the neighbouring buildings and established pattern of development in the street or part of the street where the site's located. And the plot coverage respects that which prevails in the street or surroundings. Yeah, that's the main parts to note.
Thanks very much. And I've got one question already about the entrances off Brunel Avenue. The current entrance is going to be blocked up, but is it going to be a way for the bins to be collected?
That's right. Yeah. So we've got a separate bin entrance to the south. Sorry, that would be to the north of the main entrance. So yeah, the new entrance here. We've got a scheme, a condition stating that a scheme to close the access and the existing access and erect the new access will be submitted. And then yeah, there's a new access for the bin here, and also you can obviously reach it via the pedestrian footpath. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all of my questions. Anybody else with questions? No. Councillor Cooper.
Hopefully it's relevant, but it seems to be all over. We have a growing proliferation of flats in areas which would normally provide what we call the old-fashioned type house where a family can live in. So I think we need to keep an eye on that. But also the question is, what is the market value of the properties once if they get passed and they get built? So in terms of
I don't think that is an issue for planning committee.
No?
That is not a planning committee issue.
Okay.
It may be of great local interest and great personal interest, but it's not a planning committee issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, entirely correct, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Vice.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can the planning officer please confirm that there will be no destruction of any TPO trees on the site?
Yes, so got the tree officer comments up. So yeah, all the trees of the tree officer comments state that all the trees of merit are to be retained. So we'll be losing 8 trees which are of poor or fair quality, but then as mentioned, we're going to be, and as provided, the details provided by the agent, we're going to be gaining 19 trees which will be secured in a landscaping condition to be approved prior to development. So yeah, all TPO trees are retained because as mentioned, the built development pretty much sits on the location of the existing dwelling, and yeah, biodiversity net gain of trees, and that's to be secured by condition.
Any more questions?
Thanks. It was just it's just a clarification. Sorry, and I need to find it. I think in the report where it talks about the SIL contribution, there are 2 different zones. It's referenced as being in zone A and then in zone C on the same page. Just a clarification of which zone it's in.
I believe it was zone A. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay. So it's the higher amount of SIL.
Yes, it's the highest amount.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions or seeking clarification. Right, we move on to debate then. Anyone want to talk about the actual application and the merits or otherwise thereof? Yes, councillor.
I think it's a shame that they're going to knock down single dwellings. However, it's inevitable it's going to happen. And I think it sits quite nicely on site. So I'd go for approval.
Thank
If
you.
you want that.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I've not got any problems with the application, but I might as well be consistent with past things and point out that the 8 trees disappearing, that's 240 years worth of carbon capture to be replaced by 19 trees that will take 30 years to start to replace that capture. And although it's probably necessary in this case, but I do think that too many trees disappear, mature trees, and so I'm always concerned about that.
Just to note, they are all trees of poor or fair condition that will be lost, but I appreciate your point.
Anyone else?
If
Councillor Adams.
if Councillor Hitchcock was making a proposal, which is
Well, I wasn't quite sure whether he was or not.
I'm very happy to second it, subject to the conditions laid out in the report.
Okay. So that was a proposal,
That
councillor
was a
Hitchcock.
proposal as well, yeah.
Right. So we've got a proposal. We've got a seconder. Any further comments, councillor Cameron?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can't see any problems with it as it is actually. And in terms of overdevelopment, I think the site is ample for what's being proposed there. So I don't see that there's any issues with overlooking in particular or loss of light.
Thank you. Likewise, I can't see any real issues. Likewise, I'm also concerned at losing individual houses, but the world we live in now and the economic circumstances, very few people, these houses are usually, well, they are much bigger than most of us live in, and at therefore higher prices, and very few people can afford them. And the sort of families that would fill them mostly haven't got the money to buy them. So I think we've got to be realistic in that respect as well. Well, this is it. That's another issue, the heating. So I also can't see an issue with that, although I'm sad to see houses that have been there for what 70 years, if it was built in the 50s, going. But I think we've got to recognise that there's a developing pattern in this area, that the large family houses are no longer affordable to most people, even people on substantial pays, and not wanted. So let's move to the vote. We've had a motion to accept the proposal.
Chair,
there was a change of condition, wasn't there? Or
yes,
rewording of condition.
Just for clarity, before we go to the vote, just to highlight the changes in the addendum. So we've got additional plans and also changes to the amended landscape condition, as highlighted by Ms Rose. And also, having just looked at it, it'd be helpful if we could delegate the wording of the landscape condition, but also condition 14, just because condition 14 doesn't have a requirement to implement in accordance with the details that we agree. So it's about a retaining wall, but it just needs a line added to ensure that the works are carried out in accordance with the details agreed, and if that the wording of those conditions could be delegated to the head of planning operations, we're happy to proceed on that basis, Chair.
Thank you. Are the proposer and seconder happy with that? They are. So therefore we move to the vote. Those in favour of accepting this application as it stands with the slight amendment to be finally worded of one of the conditions, that please vote in favour now.
Just 2 of the conditions, just to be clear.
Sorry?
It's 2 of the conditions.
2 of the conditions. Sorry, 2 of the conditions.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Now we move on to item 6B, which is the West Hants Lawn Tennis Club, Roslyn Road, South Bournemouth. Obviously, still has its name from before many boundary changes, when that bit of Bournemouth was in Hampshire, presumably. And we have the case officer, Piotr, ready to present. We can see your Screen,
that's
thank
good.
you, Peter.
Morning, morning, Chair,
Morning.
morning, everyone. So I'm just trying to full screen that. Oh, you see that? Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
that's brilliant. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let me start. Okay. This application seeks full planning permission for the proposed replacement of an existing single tennis court, which will be replaced with 2 new paddle courts with associated screens, fencing, and floodlights. This application was called by a local member, as well as more than 20 letters of objections have been received. The application site is located within the West Hands Lawn Tennis Club, which focuses on racket sports. The site is surrounded by hedge boundaries to the north and south. Vehicle and pedestrian access is provided from Rosling Road South, which is located right here. The club is located within the designated Mayrick Park and Talbot Woods Conservation Area. The operation of the sports club predates the designation of this conservation area and also the majority of the surrounding residential properties. On those slides, you can see some photos taken during the officer's site visit. The top photo shows the vehicle access to the site. Bottom photo shows the clubhouse and surrounding car park. On next photos, the top one, we can see a far distance photo showing the application site itself, which is the existing tennis court, and we can see a close-up showing the tennis court itself on the bottom photo. The club, on those Google Earth snapshots, you can see the club itself, and the club occupies a large site within the conservation area, as mentioned already, and has an established historic leisure use. The West Hands Lawn Tennis Club site was developed on site from former Lockmans in the early 1930s, and the conservation area itself was designated on 18th October 1988. The club is mostly surrounded by mostly separated from nearest residential dwellings by mature trees and hedgerow, and also the application the current application would replace the existing tennis court, which is centrally located within the club grounds right here. Hopefully you can see that. Just going to visual impact of the proposed works, the conservation officer raised no objection to the proposed works, as the scheme would retain exact same leisure use within the established club site. The proposed works would not be readily visible from the public viewpoints, and also won't be viewed in and also will be viewed in within the context of existing tennis club. This application follows most recent planning refusal, which was refused due to a lack of sufficient justification that the proposed paddle courts would not result in a level of noise or disturbance that would be detrimental to the living condition of the occupiers of neighboring residential properties. And in terms of the current application on this site, we can see the location of the proposed paddle courts and distances in meters from nearest residential properties. And the aim of the current application is to address sort of like previous refusal reason. And the current proposal shows more centrally located 2 paddle courts. Within the club grant, officers acknowledge that that the paddle courts game creates noise and also results in common instances of impulsive noise. However, the current application went through extensive discussions between the applicant and the council's environmental health noise officer. And finally, the consultee and officers agreed that the submitted noise assessment and supportive information confirmed that suitable controls can be implemented to prevent local residents being adversely affected by the proposed paddle tennis courts in terms of noise. It is considered that the applicant provided assurance to the local authority that the noise impact on residents will be acceptable. And also should be noted if indeed the paddle courts or proposed use would result in noise nuisance. There are still powers against a statutory noise nuisance, and the local authority still has a duty under a separate legislation, which is the Environmental Protection Act 1990. The proposals also include replacement floodlights, and the submitted lighting report has been considered acceptable. The lux levels at the closest receptors are unlikely to create any light nuisance needed to wildlife, subject to proposed planning conditions, and the council's ecologist advised that the scheme can be supported subject to conditioning the proposed flood lighting to have color temperature of 2,700 kelvins or less. In terms of the proposed acoustic fence, which will mitigate level as per recommendation from the council's noise officer, those are proposed as shown on this slide. Also, the proposal would include replacement of 2 existing small birch trees, which will be replace, and the consulted tree officer also raised no objection to such a proposal and replacement of those trees. And finally, the consulted highway authority raised no objection to the proposed works, and as the scheme would not result in a need for increased car or cycle parking provision on site. Therefore, the proposed works are acceptable in line with the adopted parking SPD. On next slides, you can see some examples of recent permissions for similar use for paddle courts, and we've got East Dorset Lawn Tennis Club, which is located in Poole. There was permission delegated approval granted on the 27th of October 2022 for 2 paddle courts, and on this site plan here, you can see the distances from nearest properties, and to the right hand side there's a school building. And on this approval, the noise officer considered that the proposed works are acceptable in terms of their impact on local residents. There was another scheme for 3 paddle courts granted by Planning Committee this year on the 18th of January. And again, we can see distances from nearest residential properties, and again this application was considered to be acceptable in terms of its visual impact on the adjacent conservation area and also on local residents. Just to summarize, the scheme will facilitate ongoing use of the existing site, which has established leisure purposes, and the proposed works are considered to be optimum use of the site. The scheme would not materially alter the existing sport facility. Also, this application would not result in material harm to the character and the wider setting of the conservation area. Also, the impacts on neighbours, neighbouring living conditions are considered to be on balance acceptable. Therefore, office's recommendation is planning approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Currick. We have various speakers registered. First of all, we have Mr. Ken Park on behalf of the local residents objecting to the scheme.
Good morning, members. Paddle tennis, as you heard, is a noisy activity. This is not disputed, and indeed the considerations before you are not whether there is any noise. The consideration is not even whether or not the residents surrounding the tennis club are affected, but the consideration is whether or not the residents should be expected to accept the additional noise because it falls within certain claimed parameters. And you've just heard from your officer that it's a balanced decision. The applicants claim the noise levels do not exceed certain levels and therefore should be accepted. They argue that the level of noise and disturbance to neighbouring properties is similar to that from existing tennis courts. But it is well accepted that paddle tennis differs from normal tennis in many respects. The character of noise is completely different. The hard ball hitting off a hard bat and hard walls is explosive and has been likened by acoustic consultants to that of a firearm. The existing paddle tennis court adjoining Elgin Road already causes significant noise and disturbance issues for the nearby residents and is clearly audible from within their houses and gardens. The noise is much louder and the activity much more disturbing than the tennis court replaced. The proposals seek to replicate this situation, affecting an even greater number of local residents with 2 additional courts. It is clear that the local residents will be able to hear the paddle tennis court activities from within their gardens and for many from within their houses. The recommendation is based on the applicant's projections of noise. In a previous application, the council reviewed these projections with an independent acoustic consultant who challenged the projections and the application was refused. In this case, the applicants used the same methodology, but there is no independent acoustic analysis, and local residents are at a loss as to why this existing or this same methodology is being accepted when previously it was not. Indeed, the residents' own acoustic consultant has raised many issues with the applicant's submissions. The applicants claim that the paddle tennis courts will be no louder and no different than normal tennis courts, and this is clearly not true as demonstrated by the existing court. Your officers are suggesting a condition allowing the courts to be in use from 8 in the morning to 9 in the evening, 7 days a week. And it is simply inconceivable to argue that noise levels that may be acceptable at certain times of the day because of high background noise levels will be acceptable at quieter times in evenings and weekends in this quiet residential area. This suggested condition simply underlines the lack of scrutiny given to this application. Also, the fact that a condition requires the noise from the courts to be measured prior to first use simply underlines the certainty that there will not be any harm. The applicants advise of the growing popularity of the sport. What this means is that the intensity of use will be high and much higher than the existing tennis court. It is likely the courts will be in full operation all day, every day. This means the constant jarring noise of hard ball and hard bat with the noise from the interaction from the players will be audible in nearby properties all day long. Paddle is popular, but it is also highly controversial because it is a noisy activity. Such sports need to be located in suitable locations. This location is not suitable. Planning policy warns against introducing sources of noise into noise-sensitive areas such as residential areas. Their proposals are for a noise-generating use into what is a quiet suburban noise-sensitive area. Local residents have no issue with the normal tennis played on the site, and indeed issues and complaints have only happened as a consequence of the introduction of the existing paddle tennis court. This was allowed by default without proper scrutiny. Members, do not let this mistake be repeated. Members, it is not safe to grant this application. The residents within this area should be able to enjoy their gardens. The proposals will result in significant adverse impact and should be refused. And it's not safe to grant a permission on the basis of that imbalance. The noise will be acceptable. Please reject this application, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Park. And now we turn to Mr. Matt Allen, who is going to speak on behalf of the applicant and therefore presumably in favour of the proposal.
Hello, members. My name is Matt Allen. I'm a Chartered Town Planner, Director of Pure Town Planning, and I'm speaking in support of this application on behalf of the applicants, the West Hands Club. The West Hands Club is primarily a rackets club which was formed in 1926 and in 1999 underwent an extensive rebuild, £5 million. The existing club has 20 tennis courts of varying surfaces, as well as 4 squash courts and an existing paddle court. The proposal before you today seeks to replace one of the existing clay tennis courts with 2 paddle courts. I wish to outline why we feel planning permission should be granted in line with the officer's recommendation. Firstly, the principle. Paddle is the fastest growing sport in the UK. It's an innovative form of tennis that's fun, flexible and easy to play. It can be played in groups of mixed ages and abilities due to it not being a power dominant sport, and it's less technical than tennis, which means it's ideal for friends and families to learn and play together. Just like with the tennis, squash and racquetball coaching programmes at West Hants, the paddle courts will be open to non-members and members of the public wishing to learn this fantastic game. The Lawn Tennis Association, the LTA, who are the governing body of tennis in Great Britain, aim to integrate paddle into the fabric of tennis. The West Hants Club is one of the LTA's regional performance centres. In addition, the club has a thriving junior tennis academy, which is partnered with a number of local schools. The LTA's paddle development plan explains one of the key strategies to grow the sport of tennis is to find new ways to grow participation, and paddle is seen as a fantastic entry to the sport of tennis, as well as being a great example of how less physically active members of the community are able to join in and participate in racket sports, promoting health and well-being. So as confirmed in your report, the proposal is in full compliance with CS31 of your core strategy, which seeks to enhance existing sporting facilities. Secondly, look at the character and appearance of the area, and I think on your screen, what's on the screen there, is the site plan. Your conservation officers raised no objection, largely because the proposed location of the paddle courts would not be readily visible from any public vantage point. They are behind a large brick wall with screening above, bounding the car park to the north. They are blocked by the clubhouse to the east. The courts are screened from the neighbouring property to the south by the intervening clay courts and a very large conifer hedge which runs across the whole length of the southern boundary. And similarly, the new courts would not be visible from Elgin Road to the west, given the existing large hedging, grandstand and multiple intervening tennis courts. Thirdly, residential amenity. As you've heard, the application follows a previous refusal on the site for 3 paddle courts back in 2022, which were sited right adjacent to the western boundary with Elgin Road. The sole reason for refusal concerned insufficient information. It would not cause a detrimental level of noise and disturbance. Following this decision, the applicants have worked closely with your officers and in particular your environmental health officer to overcome this sole reason. The new paddle courts have been specifically chosen and specifically located to the most central position within the clubs to be sited as far away from neighbouring residents as possible. It was advised by your officers that this was the most suitable location for the courts, as it also makes use of the additional screening offered by the clubhouse, the surrounding car parks and the other surrounding tennis courts. As you've heard, the applicants have provided a detailed noise assessment prepared by a qualified noise consultant, which concluded the impact on the immediate neighbouring residents would be acceptable. The local residents commissioned their own assessment, which disagreed. In view of these conflicting reports, the council environmental health officer commissioned an independent review of all the information provided. As set out in your report, following full consideration of this evidence, together with the agreed mitigation, which you saw on the screen earlier in the form of a 4-metre high screen around the northern side of the courts, flanking around the sides, as well as the 3-metre high glass screen along the western side of the courts, the environmental health officer concludes that neighbouring residents would not be adversely affected by the noise impacts from the new paddle courts. In addition, some members may recall that at the start of this year in January's Planning Committee, members granted 3 paddle courts at East Dorset Tennis Club, as you saw on the screen earlier. For consistency of decision making, it is worth pointing out that those approved courts were closer to neighbours, with less noise mitigation proposed, and the noise level at the closest neighbouring property receptor were higher than this scheme before you today. Currently, the courts are open from 9 AM to 10 PM. The officers applied the 8 AM to 9 PM, but the applicants have confirmed they're happy for the courts to open at 9 AM along with all the other tennis courts. As such, it's firmly considered the proposed new paddle courts would not have a detrimental impact on the living conditions of the surrounding residential properties. In conclusion, there have been over 70 letters of support from local residents. Your environmental health officer, your conservation officer, your tree officer, your highways officer, your ecology officer all have no objection. We hope you share your view of your professional officers and agree with the planning officer's recommendation to grant and vote in favour. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And there is a written statement from one of the ward councillors.
This is Councillor Karen Rampton. Thank you to the committee for listening to my objections as a ward councillor on this application. As per my councillor call-in submission dated the 8th of February of this year, I asked for this application to be considered by the committee due to the large number of objections we have received on both this application and previous iterations for new paddle courts at this site from concerned residents and neighbours. A number of these residents have serious concerns that the noise from 2 additional paddle courts would have a further and unacceptable adverse impact on their lives, and indeed many residents nearby are already having to keep double glazed windows closed due to the noise from the existing paddle court. This sport is fundamentally louder than the other racket sports which it replaces, with the paddle bats being noisier than their tennis counterparts, and the social nature of the game leading to more shouting and noise from the players, sometimes up to 10 p.m. at night. This is clearly impacting on the lives of those living in nearby homes. While I understand the sentiment by the relocation of the courts in this application to a more central position in the site compared to previous applications, this could have the added impact of actually just increasing the number of homes suffering from the noise impact from this sport. Although the supporting statement from Venter Acoustics dismisses the findings from the sound contour maps as being not meaningful due to the unlikely nature of all the courts being used at once, I believe this is disingenuous, as this is clearly a popular sport which is likely to be booked up and therefore in almost constant use. We have already seen high readings from the noise of this sport on site, and this will surely get worse. Accordingly, it is my view that this means the application is contrary to policy CS38 and CS41 of the adopted Bournemouth local plan. No one can deny that this sport is a fast-paced, 4-person, noisy outdoor sport with loud bangs issuing from the paddle bats and increased shouts and calls from the players. Although this is an established tennis club, this sport is definitely not what residents have become used to, and this change will have a clear detrimental impact on the enjoyment of their lives. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ms Holyoake. So now we turn to questions from members of the committee, and I'm going to leap in first, although I can see Councillor Adams is itching to ask something, and that's to do with the existing paddle court and the distance from Elgin Road, from the nearest properties in Elgin Road. Can you help me on that, Mr. Kulik?
Yes, but if you allow me to have like 2 minutes just to get the plans and do the measurements, because I don't have those plans in front of me. Because we're talking about the previous permission and the existing.
The existing one by Elgin Road that's been referred to.
Do a quick measurement, just approximately.
I can answer that. The closest
Okay.
the closest noise sensitive receptor is about 30 meters away.
And what's the nearest of the proposal? The nearest noise receptor to the proposal?
51, I believe. I think it's 51.
51. Okay, thank you. So 30 as opposed to 51. And the other thing is hours of use. Are they restricted in the same way as the likely condition on this one, or are they in use for the standard hours of the rest of the club? Which we've heard was longer.
Sure. Maybe noise officer could answer that, because I'm not 100% sure about what mitigation measurements are taken on existing other courts.
Sorry, it's not mitigation, it's just hours of use. Permitted hours of use.
I think it's the same as suggested on the CAN application.
Mr. Allen is itching to speak, so I'll turn to him, since hopefully he's got chapter and verse on this. Can you come to the mic so that everybody can hear, whoever's speaking?
My name is Peter Aldis. I've been the chief exec there through all this planning process in 97, 90, whatever. The permitted hours for the club, the rest of the club, are 8 in the morning till 10 in the evening.
Yeah.
Or they so the planning application for the paddle for those 2 courts was 8 till 9, but 9 to 9 is acceptable on those 2
I was asking about the existing paddle court.
It's 8 in the morning till 10 in the evening.
Right, and that is likely to, that will stay, whatever the decision on this one, presumably.
If I have to change it, I have to change it.
I don't think we can impose.
It would be sensible to bring, from an operation point of view, it would be sensible to bring all 3 paddle courts into the same operating period. So if it's 9 to 9 or whatever you decide, we will do it with all 3 courts for common sense.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, Councillor Adams.
So you actually stole my first question. So good minds think alike. With the previous application that was refused, you're on exactly the right screen. Could you try and like hover over where it was actually located on that map and how many meters that was away?
The previous one, the previous permission was for paddle courts located right here, just approximately, and I believe that 2015 permission was granted for 2 paddle courts.
Much closer there. So best guess is how many meters that is away from that. That's probably what, 10 meters or something. I don't know.
Yeah, if we got like 50 meters here, so that would be probably 40 meters.
Councillor Hitchcock.
The noise impact, we keep on about East Dorset, which we granted permission to, and we had the hours kept down to what we classified as a minimum, we thought. What sort of response have we had from the neighbours down there, noise wise?
That permission isn't implemented, so we can't tell you at this point in time. That was resolved to be approved subject to a legal agreement, because as Mr. Cullick showed, there was an extant consent on the south of the site, and they put in a further consent for 3 courts in the middle of the site. What we didn't want was a total of 5 courts on the site. So subject to an agreement to not implement the first permission, only to implement the second permission for 3 courts in the middle. They haven't been able to sign that legal agreement as of yet for reasons I won't go into. So that permission isn't actually in place, but it's a resolution. Once the agreement's signed, we'll issue that consent, but we can't tell you if that's generated any noise because it's not there, basically.
And the other question is, and he answered it for me, they're obviously now going to have, if they get permission, they're going to have 3 courts. So they'll have the impact of the noise on now 3 courts.
That appears to be the case, yes. Vice Chair, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just have some clarification on the acoustic fencing? Does it just go around 3 sides of the area, or does it go around the whole of the court?
Let me just quickly go back to the presentation plans. So on this slide, so you can see it actually goes on both sides and kind of like the frontage of the paddle court. So we've got 3 meters high acoustic fences to the left, then 4 meters high to this direction, and then as you can see here, proposed 2 meters high acoustic fence over existing brick wall. And just to show that on the site plan. So those acoustic fences will be towards the east, west, and north of the site.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I thought. So, I mean, I'm not a noise expert, but could it possibly be the case that because the acoustic fence only surrounds 3 sides of the boundary of the court, could there be noise escaping naturally through the only other exit that's available there with no acoustic fencing? I don't know. Anybody got any ideas on that?
Sure, we do have the environmental health officer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I
We've
can
got a
answer
hand
that.
up from the environmental officer who hopefully can answer this question.
Yeah, well, it was just to answer that question. So in terms of the noise modelling, the noise modelling demonstrated that the maximum noise escape tends to be at the entrance to the court where there's absolutely no fencing whatsoever. So the entrance on the sides of the court. So the acoustic fencing has been designed to ensure that an acoustic barrier is placed over the entrance of the court. So the modelling showed that that would be the most effective way to have an acoustic fence. Realistically, having an acoustic fence on the third site, which is effectively the closest away from the sensitive receptors, would have no measurable benefit whatsoever. So it would have, from an acoustics point of view, it would have no benefit. The most benefit is achieved by placing the fencing at the sides of the court, where the entrance to the court is, where tends to be where the most noise escape tends to occur.
Thank you very much. And just one more question regarding floodlighting. So presumably that will just be on at night time, but I mean, how many floodlights are there? What is the intensity of light, and how high up would they be? Would they be polluting the air to the extent that the local residents will be affected by that?
Sorry, again, is that question to me?
It's to whoever can answer it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew can answer that, but just to confirm, we've got like for like proposal in terms of floodlighting as far as I'm concerned. So the same number of floodlights will be retained. So we've got existing floodlights which will be replaced by new floodlights. That's my understanding.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon.
Yeah, just wondering if there's any information available on level of complaints around noise from the existing court. Just trying to get a sense of, there is one on the site, so do we know anything about whether there've been complaints, how many complaints, and any detail on that? Thank you.
Mr. Kulik, can you help us on this one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Should we ask noise officer to answer that? Because yeah, it was.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can confirm there have been complaints from the existing courts, local residents. So the existing courts are certainly much closer to local residents than the proposed courts. We have had complaints. I think the last complaint was in 2021. Myself and colleagues did an investigation. We installed noise monitoring equipment. We've done a number of visits to investigate those complaints, and as yet we've never been able to determine the noise to be at a level which we would consider as a statutory noise nuisance. So yes, to answer your question, there have indeed been complaints from the existing courts. However, the proposed courts are the separation distance between the existing courts and the proposed courts is there's much larger separation distances. I think I'd also like to come in that I actually did a visit last week to the consented courts at East Dorset Tennis Club. Two of them were in operation when I did my visit last week. It was an unannounced visit. I was passing through in the area, did a noise survey. Didn't actually take a noise measurement, but stood on site for quite a while. I didn't consider the noise levels of the two existing courts in use to be a problem. To certainly would certainly not meet the criteria of a noise nuisance.
Oh, hang on, before that, Mr. Hodges.
Yeah, and yes, I've been advised off the by a colleague that my advice was incorrect, because despite the fact it doesn't have planning permission, apparently the courts at the East Dorset Tennis Club are very much in use.
I was wondering about that.
Apologies.
The last answer.
I'm now better informed.
Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. Sorry, just to a further question on the same thing, really, which is just to clarify what, if any, acoustic protection there is around the existing paddle court at this site.
Mr. Hill, can you help us?
So currently there's no protections in terms of, there's no acoustic fence around the existing court. The orientation of the court is such that the rear of the court is closer to the noise sensitive receptors. Typically what we tend to find is that the noise escape tends to be from the sides of the court. So currently there's no control, there's no acoustic fencing at the current court. I think yeah, and I hope that answers your question. So there's no acoustic controls on the current court. We can't require the site to install acoustic mitigation because we don't have any evidence of a statutory noise nuisance.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? No? So we move on to discussion. So anyone want to start the board?
Yeah, I'm slightly uncertain on this one in as much as I've not heard a paddle tennis court. I don't involve in leisure and actually the fact that this is actually for one that is with acoustic fencing, it would be nice to know the difference it makes. I assume it softens the sound slightly. And you know, I kind of wonder if these are going to be cropping up all over the place. Whether or not we ought to actually have a formal, for want of a better word, a listening session to a court. There's one that's undampened that if the last complaint came in in 2021, that's quite a long time since there's been complaints. But you know, it's something that I struggle to make a firm thing on because I actually haven't heard the offending sort of proposal or an equivalent one anywhere to sort of judge by. So it's a little bit of a difficult one to actually judge where the dividing line is. But I am slightly swayed by the fact that the last complaint on the existing unprotected site is 3 years old. So that is of interest.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I too didn't know what paddle tennis was. So I did a bit of YouTubing yesterday and sort of got some idea of what it's. It's a bit of a cross between squash and tennis. I noticed there was comments on the sort of hard ball on hard racket, hard bat kind of thing, but the tennis balls, the balls themselves are actually physically the same. They're just running at half the pressure, almost half the pressure. I absolutely get the and doing a bit of googling around on noise about paddle courts, it does seem to be an issue, but obviously they've positioned the courts in as most central locations as they have. They put noise mitigation in there. How effective that would be in terms of reducing the noise to an acceptable or to similar levels of what the other courts are, I don't know, but yeah, it's they've obviously tried very hard to mitigate the noise.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, I've just been doing a bit of Googling as well. And I noticed that there was a similar issue with Brighton and Hove City Council with regards to some paddle courts there and complaints from neighbours. And they did put up a barrier, which was a bit of an improvement. But one of the things wasn't something that I'm thinking is if this is going to, even with the concession, that it won't open till 9 o'clock in the morning, that's great. But if it's going to go on until 9 at night, that's a pretty long time. So I'm thinking maybe one of the things that we could consider is reducing the times it can be used. So maybe a consideration could be let's say open it till 6 o'clock, so that the impact on the surrounding area and the neighbours, it gives them a bit of a break from the noise, if there is any, because as you say, we haven't really got evidence of what the noise is yet. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not getting any lead on whether whether a motion is coming forward. Maybe there is from council.
Well, I suppose if there is a motion, I propose that we need to do. I have no idea what it sounds like. I have no idea what impact that might have. Although noise pollution is having a a massive impact on the well-being of children, young people and their families all over this conurbation. And I just wonder whether we need to be wary of that. And if we are going to put it forward, then I think we need to have a site visit where we watch and listen to a game and see how noisy it is. If you've got people, if there is evidence that people are keeping their windows closed, then that is serious. I know sport is in the comment, you know, it increases the health and well-being of people who are participants, but we also need to look at the health and well-being of the people who in the immediate area listening to this all day. And I think if we don't, I don't know. I've lived by a football ground. I kind of got used to that. I've lived by a tennis court. It's a totally different sound, isn't it? It's kind of quite calming to listen to the sound of tennis on a summer's day. That's quite bourgeois. I know, but I have no idea what this court would sound like and whether it would irritate me personally to have that all day long, because it seems like from 9 till 9 is just constant. It's like Blandford Road traffic. We have that 9 till 10, constant. People are very uptight a lot of the time. So I think we've got to be really careful here. Tony's point about they are going to pop up because they're money-making machines as much as anything else. It's a sport, but it's a new sport where people can make money out of providing the facility. So I think it's a deeper conversation we need to have. We probably get really irritated with me, the guys who want to see it happen, but I'd like to go and listen to a game. Where could we go and do that? It might hold the process up. Yeah, well, we should do it. It's like a site visit. You know, how bloody noisy is it? Pardon my language, because I've no idea. So it's like asking me to vote on something which I've got no idea of.
Chair,
Yeah.
would it help? I think the purpose of obviously having our environmental health officers here is that's their area of expertise, and in effect they're putting that information that they've had, that technical information, to considered it from both sides. You've had a view from the applicant that it's acceptable. You had a view from the objectors that it's unacceptable. So in effect, what we've done is use our own internal experts and make that kind of judgment, and that's what we're offering to you today is our kind of expert opinion that we don't see the harm, and therefore we appreciate you might not personally experience that noise. I'm going to give you a second example. This previous iteration of this committee approved a waste from energy site. You wouldn't necessarily know what that means in terms of what the noise that would create. I couldn't tell you. But in effect, what we're going to do is rely on the expert views that we've had and the information that we've had. So in effect, what we're saying to you is we've investigated that issue. We think we can't see the harm. We don't think there's enough harm to refuse the application. And that's why we're with you at a recommendation for approval. Mr. Hill did have his hand up. I just wanted to know if you had anything to add to that.
He did. Oh, it's come back again.
Yeah, so really in terms of the suggestion for councillors to do their own noise monitoring, if indeed you do decide to go down that route, I'd certainly recommend that noise survey be done at East Dorset Tennis Club. I think that's more representative of this application. I think the existing paddle tennis court is certainly far closer to noise sensitive receptors at West Hands, and I think if you wanted to compare sort of like for like, I think it would be more appropriate to do the site visit at East Dorset. That's more representative of this application, particularly because you're going to have two courts in use. I mean, although the site East Dorset's got 3 courts, you could potentially have 2 courts at use at the same time, and then you can do an evaluation of the cumulative impact of these 2 courts operating at the same time. I certainly did that, and I found that very useful. So I certainly recommend that if councillors do indeed decide to do that, that would be a better survey location.
Thank you, Councillor Trent.
Yeah, can I propose then that we do have a site visit, and that because I noticed it's not actually built into the recommendations anywhere on noise. It mentions noise, but it doesn't build in the cut-off time. I think that needs to be built into the recommendation anyway, but I do think that it would be helpful for members to visit somewhere where they can actually hear the noise created by an existing court and judge accordingly. and whether that court's got an acoustic fence, because obviously that will make a difference. But you know, again, it's not clear what difference it would make. So I think it would be very useful to have a site visit before the decision is made, but that we also, as part of that site visit, consider the cut-off time for the court. You know, whether 9 o'clock, as has been suggested here, is correct or not. That's my proposal. If anyone will second it.
I think 9 o'clock is in the conditions as they stand, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, in terms of debating when the court should be in use, that would be a matter that you would debate during the meeting, Chair, not out on site. That would be a matter for your debate.
Oh yeah,
when you
yeah,
bring it
yeah,
back.
yeah. But
yeah, the condition doesn't actually.
Councillor Trent was implying that the hours are not in the document, but I think they are conditioned.
Yeah, no, condition 6.
Well, I thought the times were in the document, but I can't see it in the conditions.
Yeah, condition 6.
Condition. Oh,
okay.
Can I
separate to the bit on noise? That seems strange.
Well, the noise is a separate condition in relation to the acoustic barriers and details, and assessment and mitigation measures, and so not unusual for there to be 2 separate conditions. Chair.
I think I heard a voice saying they were seconding it, but I'm
yes. I mean, if the proposal is that we just hold the decision, and by fleet of foot we pay a visit and listen, and then come back to the table quickly, so as not to keep the applicants waiting too long, then yeah, I will second that.
If you say come back quickly, you're not suggesting we could do it today?
No,
no, good.
I've got a lasagna to cook this afternoon. I can't go off paddleboarding or whatever it is.
Whether it will be feasible to do a site visit and bring it back to the next committee in a month's time, 4 weeks' time.
Yep.
If that were the decision.
Potentially, Chair. Yes. Yeah.
Can I just ask for clarification? So we're not actually doing a site visit to the actual site. We're doing a site visit to the different sites so we can watch a game of paddle tennis and stuff.
Yes, where we can see it in action. I mean, we if we're doing a site visit, it might be thought appropriate to do it all in one and go to East Dorset where it's in action, but also go to the one at West Hants.
Yes, I think as a chair, I think it's essential that you do, if you're deferring the application for a site visit, that you actually visit the application site as well.
And I think if we're going to do that, then we should do it in the evening, because that's the biggest impact to the neighbours.
Yeah.
And that close-off point of 9 o'clock, is that when they come off the court, or is that the last time the court can be used?
I assume that's when they come off, but I can't prejudge, and I'm getting nods from the club. So yes, they have to stop playing at 9, or we'll have to, you know, if that's the agreed time. Councillor Dow?
So I just wanted some clarification. So Councillor Trent, the proposal you're saying is that we do a site visit, but also we look at the cut-off time. Does that mean that we would be looking at the cut-off time when we meet again?
Yes. Yes.
Good, because I think that does definitely need debate as well. Thank you.
I take the point that everybody's making. I think we should have done this before we looked at East Dorset. This is the trouble. We are verging on a charge of inconsistency, having agreed East Dorset, to suddenly turn around and possibly, don't want to prejudge, but possibly say no to this one. But on the other hand, we don't want to go on inflicting intolerable conditions on residents if it is intolerable, and I don't know whether it is or not. We've been told it isn't from people from experts, so I don't know. Councillor Chapman.
I think sort of the differences between this site and the East Dorset site is the train line is very, very close, so the natural ambient noise level in the area is generally higher anyway, so I'm not sure that'd be so much of a problem.
Trains are not constant.
And they're not reliable.
I mean, they're only every half an hour or something. I mean, it's a different sort of noise, is what I'm saying. It's more like almost more like a road noise.
Chair, can I just make a couple of points?
Yeah.
Just on the practicalities of site visit, just to note that obviously if you were trying to go to a different site to hear it, whether or not you're granted permission to be able to access that site is something you'd have to take up with the relevant landowners. I'm not saying they wouldn't object, they would object, but I think that's something to clarify. Having said that, I understand there isn't any case an existing paddle court on this site, so as a default you could actually go and listen to paddle court on this site as well. So that's just an observation, Chair. We can't guarantee at this moment that if you opted to go to another site, you could get appropriate.
But East Dorset has a car park. I mean, I drove into it when I went to look at the site.
So it depends how close you wanted to get.
So, I mean, well, the car park is probably similar distance to the nearest houses, so it would actually be a very good test.
I mean, just note the fact
there.
We can't guarantee it till we make sure we've checked what the position is.
Yeah, but I'm saying anyone can drive into that car park. It's a public. It's not a membership club like West Hands. It is a much more of an open one.
Yeah.
So anyone can drive into the car park, I assume.
I can't.
As I did when I went.
The point is, I don't know, Chair, but I just make the observation. So that's point number one. But that's not a reason not to do it. I just note the fact it's something officers would have to check and resolve. The other point, Chair, just to pick up on a point that was just touched on as to how you can you have any impact on existing planning permissions through this permission? I mean, the answer to that is, well, normally no, which is what you were told. But there are exceptions to that. And an example would be, for example, if you've got an existing factory and someone was proposing works to that existing factory, and as a result of those additional activities, you had to put in extra sound insulation, then you might have to encroach beyond the existing planning permission, the planning permission that's being sought, and impose requirements on the existing consent. Well, I guess there is a possibility of a comparison here if there was demonstrable evidence that there was an intensification of noise. But I think the problem is here, I don't think you've got that evidence necessarily before you, but I simply note that legally it might be possible depending on the circumstances.
So we have a proposal that's been seconded for a site visit. So we need to vote on that first.
Chair,
and then we'll have to take it from there.
Just a technicality, we need to clarify that we're deferring, not journey.
Well, we might not be, depends on how the vote on the site visit goes.
Okay, but no, in terms of if you were going to accept the site visit,
you're deferring the application.
Well, if the vote is against doing a site visit, then we will go ahead and discuss it.
It's, rather than the journey. So we would defer, have a site visit, then you'd continue the whole process first in terms of having the objectors be able to speak.
But until we've had a vote about the site visit, we don't know whether we're going to do a site visit.
I think it's a combination of the two. That's the point. If you'd vote to defer to enable a site visit to happen, that's really what I think the point's being made.
Chair, can I just clarify, just to follow on from that, I beg your pardon. I just need to check, would that require the same members to be present for the?
I would assume so, yes.
That's what I was clarifying, please.
Mr. Hill.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but normally, normally from an environmental health point of view, when we normally do site visits, we do a number of visits. Doing one visit sometimes doesn't give you an accurate enough picture. Acoustics measurements is very reliant on sort of environmental control in the environment. So you may have things like the weather could affect in terms of transmission and noise, the existing background noise levels. So for example, the site at East Dorset, if a tennis court is being used at the same time that the paddle courts are being used, you're going to get the noise contribution from the tennis courts. The day you decide to do your noise survey, you might find that it may be two people playing who are not very good at paddle tennis, and it may under-evaluate the impact. Conversely, you may have 4 people who are paddle tennis experts who the noise levels might be excessive, but wouldn't really be typical of the average. So what we tend to do when we do a noise survey as an environmental health team, we do a number of surveys. We do a number of site visits rather than just one visit, because one visit is very unlikely to be representative of the true noise impact of a proposal, and particularly with regards to this, because there's so many variables. The environment, I think one of the councillors mentioned about passing trains, that's a variable. So I think we just need to be very, very mindful that when you do your site visit, that it gives you an accurate representation of what the typical noise levels experience will be. So I'm sorry if I come across as being negative about the decision, but I just think you should just exercise caution when doing that.
Thank you. So, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, we're not noise experts, as we've just been pointed out, and conditions are variable. I'm not really seeing the a valid reason to be doing a site visit myself personally.
So any more talk from councillors on the issue of the site visit? That's what we've got a motion and it's been seconded, and that's what we'll be voting on imminently. So does anyone else want to speak to that? Get the right word.
Yeah.
Defer this meeting in order to do a site visit. The same members of the committee, in other words, we 9, bearing in mind we have one sub who will not necessarily be sub for the meeting that the issue will come up again, and the people who are missing today would not be able to participate in that item, although they could participate in anything else on that day's agenda. So we have the motion that we defer this, do a site visit, hopefully one evening, and that hopefully it can be brought back to the next meeting of the Western Planning Committee if everything can be put in place in time, which it may not be. Councillor.
Yeah, there is one mitigating circumstance to the site visit, and that's that from what we've been told, all of the existing places where it takes place are nearer residents, or there's less acoustic screening. So we would be listening to the worst case scenario possibly. And I think that would be a useful exercise, because this one has got mitigation built into it. So, but I personally don't know what the starting point is. And if the worst comes to the worst and I have to turn up for a single item and then disappear again, then we've done it before.
Okay, so let's put that to the vote. The motion is that we defer further discussion on this item in order to arrange a site visit for the members of the committee here present today. So those in favour of that, please vote now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So therefore, this item is deferred and arrangements will be made to do a site visit for us at some point in the as soon as possible, however soon that can be. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry a lot of people have had a wasted journey. You'll be back again soon, if you so desire. So we move on to item 6C, which is 11 Ashridge Avenue. Councillor Dower is leaving us temporarily because she called this application in. So she is withdrawing from the committee, although she will be speaking in support of why she called it in. So she will go and sit with the public. And we move on and back to Millie to do the presentation.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, back to me again. Let me share. Can we all see that?
We can, thank you, and we can hear you, so that's fine.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so I'll kick off. So this application is at 11 Ashridge Road in Bournemouth, applying for a householder application for a rear extension and roof alterations. So Ashridge Avenue, shown here, is a residential street located in the Kinson ward of Bournemouth and extends south of the A341. The site faces northwest onto the highway and is a detached bungalow which is in a state of disrepair. So just to show you the existing site here, it's characterised by a triangle dormer to the front roof slope, pebble dash and red brick materials to the walls, with a grassed over front garden, and the site benefits from a drop curb to allow safe highway access. The surrounding area is characterised by modest-sized detached two-storey dwelling houses, and the proposed site is the only bungalow dwelling within the near vicinity. All other dwellings in the street scene are two-storey. The photos here show the relationship of the site and neighbouring dwellings. So this photo to the left shows number 13 Ashridge Avenue to have no side elevation windows facing the proposed site, and that there's sufficient spacing between dwellings, with an old outbuilding there. And the photo to the right here shows the side of number 9 Ashridge Avenue here, with the garage sat on the shared boundary, which creates a separation between the two dwellings, with side access to the dwelling, and 2 first floor windows here facing onto number 11, the site here. These photos were taken looking towards both neighbours from the existing rear elevation. So you can see the boundary treatment is timber panel fencing, and the glass roof visible in photo 1 is the conservatory to number 9, showing there will be sufficient spacing off the boundary to not result in any significant amenity impacts. The photo to the left here, view 2, shows the relationship with number 18 Pinewood Avenue, which lies to the rear of the site, and the rear vegetation showing significant distance between the rear elevations. And the right hand photo here shows the existing dwellings relationship to the garage to number 9 here, 9 Ashridge Avenue, on the shared boundary, and the existing flat roof single story extension to number 13, which, due to the slope nature of the site, overlooks the site's garden slightly. So the existing dwelling consists of 2 bedrooms with modest roof alterations accommodating the second bedroom in the roof space here. So that's the existing floor plans and roof plan. And just to show the existing elevations here as well, we've got a dormer to the rear and front. And a bedroom built into there, and 1 bedroom to the ground floor. So this is the proposed site plan, showing the extension as outlined in green. The proposal would extend to the rear of the dwelling and include roof alterations, including a rear hip to gable, 2 side elevation dormers, and a replacement front elevation dormer. The site plan shows that due to the siting of the proposed dwelling and neighbours, the extensions would not break the 45-degree overshadowing on the horizontal or vertical splay. Therefore, though the proposal would extend beyond the existing building line, this wouldn't cause a detrimental harm to either neighbouring dwelling, and the proposal is a similar depth to the neighbouring dwellings as well, and kind of represents a similar relationship within the street scene, and that's quite common. The proposal would extend the existing ground floor 6.5 metres to the rear of the existing dwelling. This ground floor level would accommodate a large kitchen diner, whilst the roof alterations would allow for 2 additional bedrooms in this space and a bathroom as well. So the property would be a 4-bedroom chalet bungalow. Yes, so elevations. The retention of the front hip roof and dormer here maintains the original appearance of the dwelling house, and was considered a better design than that of a hip to gable, which was originally proposed. The residential design guide states that dormers must be set off the ridge line and up from the eaves, and both cat slide dormers here and here satisfy this, as they're significantly set off of the ridge and eaves. The rear hip to gable alteration wouldn't be considered as a harmful or out of character addition. The ridge height of the original dwelling is not proposed to increase, therefore a street scene plan wasn't requested. And so the dwelling would retain its current height as a chalet bungalow adjacent to 2-storey dwellings on both sides. The side elevation windows, the dormers, would be conditioned to ensure they'd be obscure glazed and restricted opening to 1.7 metres above the floor level, with side elevation skylights opening at 1.7 metres above floor level to prevent harmful overlooking. So these would serve the new uses in the first floor. The bathroom and staircase would both be obscure glaze, and then high level bedroom windows to prevent any overlooking views out from either side, and that would be conditioned. So to sum up the planning balance, the proposed rear extension and roof alterations would not be considered as out of character to the area. The hipped roof characteristic is maintained to the front elevation. Proposed dormers would not dominate the roof slope or create a horizontal emphasis, therefore comply with the Residential Design Guide and Bournemouth Core Strategy Policy CS41. There will be no harmful overshadowing due to the additions. The side elevation windows for the roof slope and dormers would be conditioned as being obscure glazed and restricted opening to mitigate harmful overlooking. And overall, the scheme will comply with policy and be considered good design and appropriate scale and siting. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have some speakers. First of all, Mr. Nigel Metcalfe in objection. So please come forward and speak when you're ready. Don't forget to put your mic on.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you. My name is Nigel Metcalfe and my wife and I live in number 9, which is next door to number 11. We've lived there for 51 years, and the reasons for our objection to the planning application for number 11 are as follows, but they are mainly personal reasons because we do feel that we're losing a lot of the sun. Our house is mainly positioned on an east to west axis, which means our garden receives the sun during most of the day, being to the north of number 11. Being lower down the hill than number 11, this means that the number 11 is 1 metre higher than us. So everything that you see adds an actual metre to it. We do lose the sun mid-afternoon with the existing house as it is. The proposed new extension, which is 6.5 metres long, is only 2.4 metres longer than the existing house, and stretches to cover 1/3 of our garden. With the end of the wall being gable end, it is straight up instead of the sloping roof as at the front. This makes it a longer length of time that the sun would not be visible and we will be in the shade from midday. This roof is approximately 6 metres high and will create a block from the existing sunshine for most of the year, therefore placing our conservatory and patio in the shade for this time. And the patio was only completed last year and is only 3 metres from this 6 metre wall. During midsummer months, the sun is at its highest and visible for most of the day, but as the year goes on and the sun gets lower, eventually it will disappear from view for the rest of the year until the sun is again above the roof. I do not have any means to estimate this, but of course, I believe it will be in August that we start losing the sun. Of course, this is made worse with the house being higher than ours anyway. We have always been led to believe that a building could not extend beyond the building lines, front and back, and assumed that even with permitted development, this would still be the case, except for a single-storey extension. This planned extension is only 30 centimetres from our boundary fence, and therefore make maintenance very difficult for the new owners. I suspect that no one on the panel would actually like a 6-foot-metre fence right against their boundary. I know that there is such a thing as permitted development, but surely not to the detriment of neighbours. And I believe they said that would be no overshadowing would occur, and that's not quite right. We were originally told that the building would remain at 2 bedrooms with a small extension being housed on and being built, and then the house will be placed on the market after completion. If such a 4-bedroom property was suddenly desired, why was the building not demolished and a 2-storey house erected in its place in keeping with the road? And why are the bedrooms so large, with 2 with a living space as well? Could they not have thought of extending sideways over a garage, for example? There is also parking to consider. With 4 bedrooms, there's a possibility of 4 cars, and there's no sign of a garage and parking places, etc. This road is extremely short of parking spaces, and the whole of the road is always busy with parked cars and commercial vehicles day and night. Sometimes it is crowded and can be very difficult for an emergency vehicle to navigate down the road, as it's only a narrow road, and any extra vehicles would add to the problem. I know the way forward is cycling, but let's be honest, that's okay in fine weather, but no one does it in winter. So they wouldn't have a cycle parking area wouldn't be advantageous to this house. It would have been nice if the planning officer had visited us to see the problems and why we were objecting before the situation had got this far. The ironical thing is that when I inquired about a small extension to our garage in 1995 for a home office, I was informed that I could not have one because it would exceed the building line. That's really all. And as I do say, it's purely for our house, you know, for my wife and I, that I'm objecting to this. But I do believe that the house will be overshadowed completely by this extension. And I've looked around the area and I cannot find another house that extends beyond the building line at 6.5 metres. That's it. Thank you very much for listening to my objections.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalfe. And now we have Mr. Matthew Knowles on behalf of the applicant.
Good morning, members. The existing property, 11 Ashridge Avenue, is a dilapidated chalet bungalow, which was probably built in the 1930s. It's a chalet bungalow between two houses, so consideration was given to complete demolition and reconstruction of a two-storey house. However, it was decided to maintain the character of the street scene and extend the existing property using the existing fabric where possible in a sustainable way rather than demolishing and adding to landfill. So the submitted scheme is to keep the chalet aspect of the building extending rearwards with the addition of two small cat slide dormers to either side. The dormer facing number 9 Ashridge Avenue has a single obscure glazed bathroom window towards the front of the dormer and a couple of high-level Velux windows in the roof slope. All these windows are non-opening below 1.7 metres. The dormer facing number 13 has a single obscure glazed window and a couple of high-level Velux windows, as before, in the roof slope. None of the first floor side elevation windows will enable overlooking at all. With regards to footprint coverage, the footprint of number 9 takes up 23% of the plot. The footprint of number 11, as extended, takes up 24% of the plot. The footprint of number 13, in comparison, takes up 32% of the plot. All three properties are approximately 15 metres from their respective rear boundaries, with number 11 being extended. So this is not an unreasonable sized property in relation to the plot size and is in keeping with the other properties along Ashridge Avenue. And together with that, the planning officer noted the rear of the extended property is still 35 metres from the nearest property beyond the rear boundary in Pinewood Avenue. The points raised under the objection, size and height of the rear extension will infringe on light as the residents of number 9 sit on the patio every evening. The extended property at number 11 will extend slightly beyond the rear of number 9, but as the planning officer pointed out, it will not be overbearing, nor will it result in a loss of outlook. Second point, the planned side elevation windows will overlook and impinge on privacy. This is not the case, as the windows are non-openable below 1.7 metres in height, and that has been conditioned. The residents of number 9 sit on the patio every evening, and it will affect the enjoyment of their home. As the planning officer pointed out in their recommendation for approval, the extended property will not be overbearing. Also, any evening sun has long since moved around to the west, which is, of course, the front elevation, far from the rear patio. Whilst carrying out general maintenance, the applicant has received positive comments from surrounding neighbours who are looking forward to this dilapidated property being brought back to life. So in summary, some of the comments made by the planning officer suggest this is a logical addition to the property in keeping with its scale and character, not dominant, overbearing or harmful, dormers of an appropriate size, there would be no harmful overlooking, no harmful overshadowing or loss of light, and complementary to the street scene. Thank you for the time to speak. I urge you to follow the planning officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. And now we have Councillor Michelle Dower in her ward councillor role rather than committee member role.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing this call in for me to speak on behalf of Mr. Metcalfe. I do have a presentation prepared. I'm hoping that that will be on the screen in a moment. While that's being set up, I just want to explain about Mr. and Mrs. Metcalfe, who moved to Ashridge Avenue in 1972. So it was home for their children who long since flown the nest. Their keen gardeners have spent their retirement changing and updating and improving their garden, and they enjoy sitting on the patio, as has previously been mentioned. Mr. Metcalfe was advised by the developer, as were his neighbours, that there was to be a single-storey extension to the back of the house. Mr. Metcalfe would not have objected to that. However, the planning application does not reflect this, and they are concerned that the height at the back extension will infringe on the light into their garden. I'd like to actually demonstrate this now by, if we look at the next slide. So we can see here, this, you've already seen this, and the boundary there. So you can see that the green line to the right of the picture, that is where the extension will extend to. What I'd like to do is move on to the next picture, and this shows the boundary. So when I read the report from the planning officer said that the proposed dwelling sits on the shared boundary with number 9 and would extend 2.2 metres beyond the rear elevation of number 9. Although the proposal does stretch further along the shared boundary, the neighbour is set approximately 5 metres to the north with an intervening garage. Now you can see here that the patio is facing the boundary of where the extension is expected to be. That bush on the left-hand side is where the extension will stretch to, and I'll show you that in a moment. If we move on to the next screen, you can see this is Mr. Metcalfe standing to where the extension is expected to go. And in here you can also see the height of the bungalow at its current level. Now, if you can imagine, that is going to be extended to the same height all along to where Mr. Metcalfe is currently standing. That is going to have an impact on his view and his enjoyment. So the impact is overbearing. And I think it's quite easy to visualize that from what we've got, what you can actually see there. So there's the patio in the bottom left, right-hand corner. The bungalow there, which is going to extend right across to where Mr. Metcalfe is standing, and the impact on his view and light. So if we move on to the next slide, I would request that the committee actually refuses this planning application, because it will be overlooking their garden and their privacy. They will have a loss of daylight and sunlight, and it will be overshadowed. The scale and the dominance is clear for everybody to see from those images. And Mr. Metcalfe has already mentioned the traffic and parking issues that will potentially happen with a 4-bedroom house. So thank you for listening to my objection. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, committee members.
Thank you, Councillor Dower. So on to questions. Councillor Salmon, then Councillor Chapman-Law.
Thank you. I'd like to know about what policy says about loss of daylight and sunlight to a garden. I'd like very specifically. We've heard quite a lot of talk about overlooking and privacy, but specifically loss of sunlight and daylight seem to be the key issue here. I can understand that there's going to be obscure glazing or no glazing or limited glazing and therefore not overlooking, but that is a separate issue. And so at times in this discussion so far, it feels like they've been slightly conflated at times. So I just want to really clearly think about sunlight and daylight and what the policy says about the neighbours' rights to maintaining that level in their garden.
I think we're about to get the the version from I can't think of the word. Anyway, Mr. Hodges has got the answer.
Yeah, so it's a policy CS41 in the local Bournemouth local plan, and hopefully.
Can you see it? I've been sharing it.
Oh.
We can't. No, we can't. Yes, we can now.
So key aspect is hang on, I've lost it. I had it and then I've lost it. Yes, so
in the first paragraph.
The first paragraph, isn't it? Yes, yeah, sorry, yes. So development through scale, density, layout, siting, character and appearance be designed to respect the site and surroundings, provide high standard of amenity to meet the day-to-day requirements of future occupants and contribute positively to appearance and safety of the public realm. And here we are. And also in the second paragraph, council will seek to ensure that all new developments enhance character, local distinctive amenities of future occupants and neighbouring residents. So you don't have a a specific target level or etc. in that. It's a planning judgment, professional judgment each time.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, can you just confirm that there? I mean, from Google Street View, it looks like there's currently no off-street parking, and I assume, and the plan doesn't actually show anything about any inclusion of off-street parking.
Have you got any information on this, Mary?
I'm just looking at the plans. Sorry. It does have a front garden. I was just trying to. Sorry, I'm covering this on behalf of a colleague. I wasn't the case officer, just to make it clear. There is space in the front garden for two cars to park, and that would be the maximum requirement that highways would require in their SPD. So for 4-bedroom dwellings, which are in Zone D, I'm not sure off the top of my head if this is Zone D, but that's the maximum amount of parking spaces that would be required. And there is sufficient space to park 2 cars from what I can see to the front of the dwelling.
Yeah, the applicant's got his hand up, so on this occasion I will ask him to tell us. Come to the mic if you would. Then everyone can hear, people listening at home.
There is driveway access from Ashridge Avenue, and down the side of the property there has been parking, and there has been parking on the front of the property as well.
Is that scheduled to continue?
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I mean thank you for the presentation, Michelle. That was very telling on the overbearings. I mean, they're going to lose a lot of sky view with this with the extension to the back. I would be pretty annoyed if that happened in my back garden, and I can see why why there is the objection there. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty telling, isn't it? It's very, very over the top, in my view.
Anyone else? Yes,
they could have pitched the roof back at the back of the property as the front, then that would have loosened the impact on the neighbours. But that obviously isn't an issue for us. But
no, we have to go with what's in front of us.
Yeah, but it's just a shame they didn't think about that before.
Anyone else? Someone want to make a motion then? Proposition, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I assume we can. I'd like to motion to refuse based on the overbearing.
Have we got a seconder for that? Councillor Adam?
Could I suggest some words in it that it might be contrary to policy CS41 because inappropriate density scale and sitting or something.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, I do.
Maybe.
And any discussion now on this? No.
Chair, I think yes, if we're going to move for refusal, I think we need to be clear on what the harm is, where the breach against the policy CS41 is, and our understanding of how we would defend that harm and articulate that harm. From our point of view, Millie, could you just put the layout plan back up, please? I'm just going to point at the screen. Yeah, perfect. Oh, you put it back in presentation mode.
Sorry.
That's great. The neighbouring property here. So this is the conservatory at the end of this property here. So the outlook for that property is down that garden. It's down that garden. So even if the extension is built, what you've got is an outlook out there along the garden, private garden, unaffected. So any overbearing impact, which you're arguing, sits against what's the garage and then what looks like a shed or sort of outbuilding here, and then a patio area here. So the reason that the application is recommended for approval is that the harm from that, for us, is much harder to defend and articulate in terms of that bulk affecting what in effect is the outlook from the rear of that property. If you look at the back of the property, it's got a single rear-facing window again, it looks down that garden. So that outlook is unaffected. Sun will come up here on the east, so sun will be unaffected until we get later on in the day. So any additional shadowing, again, any additional shadowing falls over these sort of outbuildings, actually outbuildings on the side here. So I think just to give you a bit more background on why we can't see the harm in this case, and why we need to be able to demonstrate that harm if we refuse the application.
Thank you. I think the objection or the concerns were not, in fact, it's been specifically said, not outlook, overshadowing in that sense. It's loss of light, as far as I can understand it. Councillor Salmon.
I was going to say, I do always caution about loss of light, because loss of light is something that's measurable. You've got standards you can that you have in the BRE guidelines, and don't have any technical data to support that. An overbearing impact, something that's overly dominant, that's more of a planning judgment. There's no hard and fast rules. That's about where your building sits, how big the building is, what are the distances, what are the gaps between them. So in terms of that overbearing impact, I think, again, what we want to draw your attention to is the extent that it sits off that boundary, and the way that the building projects away from the neighbouring property to the north, and that limits that impact. So in actual fact, where that building is seen, right on the boundary, it's a fairly limited part of what's a quite generous garden, and which isn't affected significantly in terms of the wider impact. There's some change, there's some impacts, we accept that. We don't see that it's a harm where we can defend a refusal.
Clement.
Thank you, Chair. It would appear, looking at the boundary, the back boundaries to all the other properties in the road there, that it does extend further than most of them, unless that's an optical illusion, but that's how it looks to me. I think I would feel more comfortable with it if it was in line with what's already there.
Councillor Salmon, then Councillor.
Thank you. So this is why my question originally was about sunlight and daylight, and the response that just had, thank you for that, is that there are technical measurements and we don't have any data. This has come up before in this committee, and where this is a building being proposed to the south of somebody's garden, the sun tracks round to the south. That means that during the day this garden will be impacted. There will be less light in this person's garden. That has a detrimental impact on their quality of life. I understand it needs to be measured. If it hasn't been measured, I'd suggest it needs to be measured so that we can, instead of saying, oh, we think it might be too much, or we don't think it'll be too much, we can say for sure it meets a standard. You mentioned the BRE having a standard. So is there something we can do around asking the applicant to go away and do that measuring and come back with that information so that a definite decision can be made rather than it might be or it might not be and we're not sure and depends how we feel, which doesn't feel like the best way to do things.
Okay, on the basis of the layout of the neighbouring property to the north, where it's got the conservatory on the rear, so that's a glazed room. So that will receive all the light from early morning from the east coming round. Any additional overshadowing that you would get from the building on the background during that sort of midday later in the day won't be affecting the amount of light and daylight that gets from the east elevation still. So it's a fairly low bar. For example, just to give you an idea, the only time I've seen it in my professional career where we won it on a loss of light was where you had a 2-storey building across from a 4-storey building across a sort of medieval street pattern of only about 5 meters depth. So it doesn't need, it's a fairly low bar to get adequate light to pass that test. So that's why I'm worried about it. If you think the building is overbearing and over dominant, again, that's a planning judgment, and I don't have a problem with that. What I'm cautioning you against is using loss of light as a reason for refusing.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, one of the things I do struggle with, and I must admit it's something I think about when I look at the plans list in my ward and sort of think, sort of why is that an application and not permitted development? Am I right in saying that if it was a metre more shallow at the rear, it would be permitted development? Because I think the extra done everywhere, but would it be permitted development if it was just a metre shorter?
No, it's not quite straightforward as that, because it's effectively 2 stories, because it's got accommodation in the roof. So you could do 4 meters single story without planning permission, and under what's called a prior approval procedure, you could go up to 8, but that's subject to consultation with your neighbours. You may object, and then we have to consider their objections. So I think it's likelihood we would potentially have an objection from the neighbour. So I don't think you can't, it's difficult to say there's a direct fallback position to do an 8-metre long single story extension because you haven't been through that process. So, but you could do 4 meters, but only at single story and maximum 4 meters high. I think it's 4 meters high. Yeah, people who are dealing with it more frequently than me will be better informed. But yeah, there isn't a fallback to do the same thing as PV, is a short answer.
Oh, I thought it was on percentage, which is where my calculation of a metre or so sort of came in, because if it's about 2.5 metres further out, just over a metre less. But I've obviously oversimplified that.
Yeah, it's distances from it.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Can you remind us of the wording? We've talked so much since.
It was overbearing and over dominant contrary to CS41 due to its scale and mass. There's no conviction whatsoever.
And you're happy? And you're happy to continue with that? Okay, thank you. So we've got the motion. We need to vote on it. Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, I was getting mutters. I could tell they hadn't transmitted to the rest of the
room.
room.
I think if we just delegate to the head of planning for the precise wording, but to incorporate those reasons, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we've got that motion seconded. If you agree with the motion for refusal, vote yes now. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's unanimous.
Thank you.